The Buddha didn't teach acceptance. He taught escape. The Romantics had a concept they called negative capability, the ability just to be with things and not try to figure things out, just to appreciate basic sensory impressions and be content to stay there. This concept has had a big influence on how Buddhism is understood here in the West. A lot of people approach meditation as a process of developing negative capability, just to be with things as they are, not to pass judgment on them, not to try to figure them out, which is very ironic. Because you look into the teachings of the forest masters, especially, and they have a very active approach to meditation. There's a Dhamma talk in which Ajahn Mahabhuwa defines Vipassanā as exploration. You're trying to figure out, why is the mind suffering? What is it doing to make itself suffer? How can it stop? This takes the Four Noble Truths as questions. The Buddha points our attention in the right direction. We're looking for the cause of suffering. We're not going to be looking outside. We have to look inside. We have to look at our cravings, see why we crave things. He has you look for the allure of something. That's precisely what he's focusing on. Where are your cravings focused? Why do you crave these things? Positive capability. Think of that passage we chanted just now, the 4 Dhamma summaries. It was given to a king. He was asking a monk, why did you ordain? Because he was under the impression that people ordained because they'd lost family, they'd lost wealth, their health was bad, yet none of this was true in the monk's case. Basically, his reasons came down to the problem of craving. We live in this world where there's aging, illness, death, where nothing is really ours, and yet we keep wanting to come back for more. The teachings of the Buddha give us an opportunity to explore that question. Why? Why do we do this? It's going to take a lot of figuring out because the mind is very subtle. As Ajahn Chah once said, one of the first things you learn when you watch the mind is how much it lies to itself. So you don't just sit there with the lies and say, well, the lies are like this. Try to figure out, what are they misrepresenting? What are they hiding? All too often, the allure is something we're not fully aware of because we're not very proud of it. The Buddha teaches us the concepts or the perceptions of inconstancy, stress, not self, not just to say, this is how things are, but to point out the drawbacks of the things that we find attractive and to figure out why, even though we've run into their drawbacks many, many times, we still go for them. Like the case of the king, King Karabya, Venratapala had him reflect on how he used to be strong, but now he can't even control where to put his foot. He wants to put his foot in one place and it goes someplace else. When he's sick, he can't ask his courtiers, even though they have to depend on him, to share out some of his pain. Those are the teachings on inconstancy and stress. As for his wealth, he can't take it with him when he dies. That's not self. So he's been reflecting on all this, but still he wants to come back for more. If he had the opportunity to conquer another kingdom, even on the other side of the ocean, he'd go for it. 80 years old, he's a fool. But so are we all. We keep coming back, coming back, coming back. And here we have an opportunity to understand why. It may take time to figure things out, but it also takes time not to figure things out. It takes a lot more time. It's like realizing you're stuck in prison and you want to get out. You realize it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of subtle work. How are you going to find a tool to dig your hole? And how do you know exactly where to dig the hole and not be found? Other people may say all that effort for getting out. It's a lot easier just to accept the fact that you're in prison. Prison is like this. Be accepting, but you're still stuck in prison. If you try to get out, at least there's hope. And the Buddha is saying there is a way out. You may run into all kinds of weird things underground. You can dig a tunnel in one direction and run into a foundation. So you have to turn around and try another direction. But you want to keep your desire to get out as strong as possible. And you have to learn the patience that goes with that. Okay, you say, this is a long-term process. I have to be patient, but I also have to be inquisitive. For a lot of us, that's a hard combination. But that's what we have to learn. If you're going to get out, you have to master the skills for getting out. You've probably seen escape movies where it takes a long, complicated process to figure out how to dig the tunnel to get out, how to slip out without being detected. But when you get out, it's worth it. And you've learned a lot in the process. Much more than simply saying, well, this is what prison is like. I'll learn to accept it. We're not here to anesthetize ourselves. We're here to become more perceptive, more inquisitive. Things that we ordinarily take for granted, we want to start questioning them, especially when you say, I like this, and of course I like this. Who wouldn't like this? Well, arahants don't let that liking or disliking get in the way of getting beyond these things. So it's something you've got to learn. And that of course attitude, you've got to watch out for that attitude because it hides all kinds of things. It imposes restrictions on you. This is why the Buddha says that when you define yourself, you're placing limitations on yourself. When you simply accept things, you're placing limitations on yourself too. There are some things that Buddha has you accept. The fact that there is pain in life. The fact that there are going to be people saying nasty things to you. The fact that when you look back on your past behavior, you'll see you've made some bad mistakes. All these things you learn to accept. But as for the unskillful qualities in the mind that are causing you to suffer, the Buddha says, don't accept those. I came across a book one time on the Four Noble Truths in which the author was saying, we're not here to get rid of craving. We're here to learn how to live with it and be okay with it. I translated that for Ajahn Suwat, and he said, the author is teaching people to be stupid. The Buddha's not here to teach us to be stupid. He's teaching us how to figure things out, how to figure out what are the right questions to ask to get out. And he gives us the tools for examining where our attachments are, the things that keep us imprisoned. That's the big irony. This is one of the reasons why early Buddhists used fire as an image many times. They believed that fire was an element that existed in all things. When you provoked it, it would latch onto fuel and start burning. It was trapped in the fuel because it was clinging to the fuel. The fuel was not trapping it. It was trapping itself in the fuel through its clinging, the same way the mind traps itself with its clinging. That's why it's in prison, and why getting out of prison requires letting go. Letting go, of course, is a lot more complicated than we might think. You can't just say, well, let go and be gone. As we were saying today, the mind is like a parliament. It's got lots of different politicians with lots of different agendas. One member of the parliament may be holding on for one reason. Another member of parliament may be holding on for another reason. It's very meticulous work, taking these things apart. But again, what else are you going to do in prison? Just sit there? You've got the skills to get out. And if you don't have the skills yet, you can develop them. What we're doing here is not humanly impossible. As the Buddha said, if this path of abandoning unskillful qualities and developing skillful ones wasn't possible, he wouldn't have taught it. And if it didn't lead to real happiness, he wouldn't have taught it either. So he's basically saying, you can do it, and it's going to be good for you. You've got to keep that attitude in mind all the time, whatever you do, wherever you go. It's in that way that you can hope to be free. So we're developing positive capability here. We do have to figure things out, but take joy in that. Think of the problem of suffering as being a puzzle you enjoy learning how to solve. You'll learn a lot in the process, and you'll have freedom as your reward. Inner authorities. People often speak of the inner critic as if there were only one. Actually, there are many. We've picked up voices from who knows where. They all have different values, which is one of the things that drives you crazy about inner criticism. You try to obey one critic, and another critic comes in from another angle and says, no, you're wrong. You feel like you can't win. A large part of the practice is learning how to pare down those critics to one you can rely on. Learn how to give prominence to that one. Make that one authoritative. We've encountered so many authorities in our lives. Our parents, teachers, voices in the media. We gather them up, and they rattle around in our heads. We learn to think of them as being part of us, that we believe the things they say. I know in my own case, during my first year in Thailand, I spent a lot of time alone on a mountain. Ajahn Phuong was at the foot of the mountain. It was good to have somebody who I could learn to trust, to help sort out all the different voices in my head. I found one of the best approaches was to try to identify where did that idea come from? Where did this idea come from? Whose voice is this? Whose voice is that? You can ask two questions. One, when you can identify a voice, you can ask, does that person have your best interest in mind, or better, at heart? Especially with the media, you never really know. Why do they want you to believe what they're telling you? That's a good question to ask every time you read the media or listen to the media. Who wants you to believe that? Why? Learn to question the authority. The next question is, what do these people know? Even people who mean you well may be pretty ignorant. How many voices in your mind take into consideration the fact that maybe the big event in human history is the Buddha's awakening? Think about the Buddha himself. This is one of the reasons why conviction in that awakening is such an important part of the practice. I was having a conversation one time with someone whose background was in Christianity and Zen, and he said, "Really, you Theravadins, what do you have faith in?" He added, "It has to be something specific, not something general like the Dhamma." I said, "I have faith in the Buddha's awakening, that he really was awakened through his own efforts, and that he was able to explain how he gained that awakening in a way that other people can gain awakening too." Think about that. That's a big event. The awakening involved total cessation of suffering. It came from training the mind. Think about the Buddha himself, how many voices he had to sort through. People told him that the path he was following was an impossible one. He had sought out the teachers who were most authoritative in that time and found their teachings lacking. He had to pull himself out of their training. And how did he finally know who was right and who was wrong? He found a path that led to something that was deathless, a knowledge that didn't involve the aggregates at all. We sometimes think that as you listen to Buddha's teachings, you finally get to a point where they make sense. It really hits home that what he says is true, and that somehow is awakening. That's not awakening. That's just conviction. The real proof is when you find the deathless inside. Think of that image of the elephant hunter looking for a big bull elephant. He goes into the forest and he sees some big tracks. Now, because he's an experienced elephant hunter, he doesn't immediately jump to the conclusion that these must be the tracks of the big elephant he wants. After all, there are dwarf females with big feet. The tracks could be theirs. But they look likely, so he follows them along. He sees scratch marks up in the trees. And again, he doesn't come to the conclusion that these must be scratch marks of a big bull elephant, because there are tall females with tusks. The scratch marks might be theirs, but they look likely, so he follows them. Finally, he comes to the big bull elephant itself, either in a clearing or under a tree. That's when he knows, this is the big bull elephant I want. In the same way, you follow the path and get the mind in a good states of concentration. Those are footprints. You gain psychic powers. Those are scratch marks. But then, in the words of that particular sutta, you arrive at completion. In other words, you've seen the deathless. It's an awareness that has nothing to do with form, feelings, perceptions, thought constructs, or sensory consciousness. That's when you know you've found something genuine. Up until that point, you're going on conviction. But think about it. Aren't the Buddha's standards for conviction a good measuring stick for how to sort through the voices in your mind? Which ones know about the possibility of the deathless? Which ones know about how you can train yourself to do all the things required by the path? The voices that are aware of that take that into consideration. Those are the ones you want to assume authority in your mind. As for the other voices, you can question them from the perspective these more knowledgeable ones. What happiness do they propose? What duties do they propose? The media like to tell us that we have to be responsible citizens and pay attention to what the media have to say, basically telling us that we have to be indoctrinated, and it's our duty to be indoctrinated. Why do we let them have sway over our minds? They're telling us that the important things in the world are things that other people are doing someplace else, whereas the Buddha's message is that the important things in the world are what you're doing right now. That's a message that gives you power. The message of the media makes you powerless, makes you feel inadequate. Why are you duty-bound to accept their indoctrination? If you're going to adopt views that you'll take as working hypotheses, try the Four Noble Truths and the duties they entail. Instead of being duty-bound to keep in touch with the news, you're duty-bound to comprehend your suffering, to see that suffering is in the clinging, to abandon the cause, to realize cessation, which means that you develop dispassion for the causes of suffering, and then you do that by developing the path. Those are duties with your best interests in mind. They're duties that tell you that you have the power in your hands to make a difference in your life, a really big difference. Those are the voices you want to listen to. Those are the ones who should have authority inside. So, sort through your inner voices. When an idea comes to your mind, where did it come from? The Buddha calls this guarding the truth. Where did you get the idea? And why would you believe it? On the basis of reason, the basis of obligation. The mind has so many ways of making itself feel obligated to do unskillful things. Learn how to see through those false obligations. Remember, the duties the Buddha gives you are not imposed on you. He doesn't say you have to follow them, but he does say that if you do follow these duties, they'll lead to the ultimate happiness. What pushes you to adopt those duties, of course, is the fact that you're suffering and your recognition that something's got to be done. There's that misquote from the Buddha in which he says that he teaches one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. Many people have pointed out that that's two things, unless you decide that accepting suffering is the end of suffering. But the Buddha never said one thing and one thing only. What he said was, all I teach is suffering and the end of suffering. Two things. So we have a choice. Which do you want? Do you want to keep on suffering, or do you want to put it to an end? The duties that come from the media, the duties that come from other voices inside, are on the side of continuing suffering. The voices that take the Buddha's awakening into consideration are on the side of not suffering. Learn how to make that clear distinction and use it as your sorting principle inside as to which voices should have authority and which voices should just be left to float by. It's in this way that you can straighten out your inner committee. After all, we do have to have that inner critic. You want to make it one and make sure that it's on the side of the Dhamma. The Buddha said the self should be its own prosecutor. This is what he meant. You need to be your own inner critic. Without that inner critic observing you, telling you, for your own good, when you've done something wrong, you're lost. Make sure you have the voices of the noble ones inside, because when they criticize you, they're criticizing you out of compassion. We should be grateful for their criticism. Those are the people who should have authority inside. Learn how to trust them. They really do mean you well, and they really do know what they're talking about. But you won't know that, of course, until you've had a direct experience of the bull elephant. Still, this is a good working hypothesis to follow on the power of your actions, because where do other hypotheses take you? Do they know where they're taking you? As the Buddha said, there are many different paths in life, and a lot of people don't know which path they're on. Some of the paths go to some pretty bad places. They may not look bad themselves, but they take you down. Other paths take you up. The path that the Buddha lays out has had a lot of people to certify that, yes, it's the best and it's true. So take them as your inner authorities. You'll always be glad you did.